The night the storm came to Hollow Creek, the desert felt alive. The wind screamed through the canyons like a lost soul, and the rain lashed the wooden rooftops until the whole town seemed to shudder under heaven's fury. Lightning split the sky wide open, flashing against the cracked earth and lonely silhouettes of horses tied outside the saloon. It was a night meant for the restless and the desperate, one that seemed to hide more than it revealed. Inside a small clinic at the far edge of town, Clara Weston worked by the dim glow of an oil lamp. The glass chimed softly each time thunder shook the walls. She wiped the sweat from her brow and dipped a cloth into a basin of clean water. A feverish child lay on the cot beside her, breathing shallowly. His mother sat nearby, hands clasped, whispering prayers into the storm. Clara's father, Dr. James Weston, had been tending to patients since dawn. He was a man whose shoulders bent under years of service, his face carved with sleepless nights and the weight of other people's pain. He dozed now in a chair near the door, spectacles tilted, head nodding forward. "His fever's breaking," Clara said gently to the mother. "He'll be all right by morning." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she reached for Clara's hand. "God bless you, Miss Weston." Clara smiled softly, brushing a strand of golden hair from her face. "Just rest. The worst has passed." The mother gathered her son and left into the storm, clutching him close beneath her shawl. When the door shut, the clinic grew still except for the drumming rain. Clara leaned against the table, exhaustion settling in her bones. She looked toward her father, how his chest rose and fell slowly, how the lines of worry never left his face, even in sleep. The thunder rolled again, deep and distant. Clara closed her eyes, praying for peace to finally come to this weary town. But fate had other plans. It began with a sound. Not thunder this time, but something sharp and frantic. Knocking. 3 hard bangs against the clinic door. Then silence. Then again. Louder. Her father stirred. Who, in heaven's name, would come at this hour? Clara grabbed the lamp and stepped toward the door. The wind howled through the cracks as she called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the rain. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then unlatched the bolt. The door swung open, and a man collapsed against the threshold. The lamp flickered as she gasped, catching him before he hit the floor. His body was heavy, his breath ragged. A dark stain spread across his side, soaking through his torn shirt. Lightning flashed, and for an instant she saw his face, young but hardened, with a jaw roughened by days of dust and blood. "Father!" she cried. Dr. Weston rushed over, dropping to his knees beside her. "Bring him to the table. Quickly, girl!" Together they heaved the stranger onto the operating table. His hat fell off, revealing tousled black hair damp with rain. A revolver hung loose in his holster, its metal glinting with each flash of light. "Good Lord," her father muttered. "That's a bullet wound. Fresh one, too." Clara pressed a cloth to the bleeding side. "He's losing too much blood. We need to stop it." The doctor looked up, eyes narrowing. "Did you see his belt? That gun? This man isn't a farmer or traveler, Clara. He's trouble." She met his gaze. "He's dying, Father. I'm aware. But if the sheriff finds out we sheltered a criminal—" A groan interrupted him. The man stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded them, then pain. His voice came out low, strained. "Please, don't let them find me." The plea was barely more than a whisper before he fell unconscious again. Dr. Weston sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "You don't even know his name." Clara tightened the cloth, steadying her trembling hands. "Then I'll learn it when he wakes, but I won't let him die." The doctor stared at her for a long, weary moment. Then he nodded toward his instruments. "Get the whiskey and the needle." The hours that followed blurred into a haze of thunder, sweat, and the smell of iron and smoke. The bullet was deep, lodged near the ribs. Clara held the lantern close while her father worked, his hands steady, even as the storm shook the walls. When he finally extracted the bullet, it clinked softly against the metal tray. A tiny, cruel reminder of how fragile life could be. "Keep pressure on the wound," her father said. I'll fetch more bandages." When he left the room, Clara remained by the stranger's side. The lamplight painted his face in gold and shadow. High cheekbones, a faint scar beneath his left eye, lips pressed tight in pain. He looked like a man who had known both violence and sorrow. His hand twitched suddenly, catching her wrist. Clara! Her breath caught. He had said her name, but he was still half dreaming, lost between pain and consciousness. He muttered something else she couldn't understand, then fell still again. Clara sat there for a long moment, her heart thudding louder than the storm outside. How could he have known her name? Shun. When her father returned, she said nothing of it. Together they stitched the wound, cleaned his blood, and covered him with a blanket. By the time they finished, the night was fading into gray dawn. Dr. Weston straightened up, exhaustion in every motion. "You've done enough, Clara. Go rest." She looked down at the stranger, then back at her father. "He'll live? With rest, maybe. But I won't lie to you. If that bullet had gone an inch deeper, we'd be digging a grave instead." Clara nodded faintly. "Then he stays, until he's strong enough to walk." Her father frowned. "You're risking more than you know." "I know," she whispered, "but I couldn't forgive myself if I didn't." The doctor sighed deeply and walked toward his study. "Very well, but if the sheriff comes knocking, I'll say nothing of this. You're on your own." The door shut behind him, leaving Clara alone with her patient. The storm had quieted now, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the window. She dipped a cloth into the basin and gently wiped the dirt from the man's face. Up close, he looked younger, no older than 30, though life had etched hard years into him. She wondered what roads he had walked to end up bleeding on her floor. The first rays of dawn crept through the window, painting the room in pale gold. Clara placed the cloth aside and sat near the edge of the bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. When he stirred again, it was gentler this time. His eyes blinked open, deep hazel, clear now, like the earth after rain. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, rough as gravel. "In Hollow Creek," she said softly. "At my father's clinic. You were shot." He winced as he shifted. "I remember. Gunfire. Horses. You're safe now. Rest." His gaze wandered the room before settling back on her. "You stayed with me." "Yes." "Why?" She hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally she said, "Because someone had to." He gave a faint, tired smile. "You shouldn't have." "Maybe not. But I did." He closed his eyes again, as if the weight of those words was too much to bear. Clara adjusted the blanket and stood, intending to leave, but his hand reached out weakly, catching her sleeve. "Thank you," he murmured. Her heart tightened. "Sleep now. We'll talk when you're stronger." When she stepped outside the room, the morning sun was breaking through the clouds, scattering light across the muddy street. The storm had passed, leaving behind silence and the scent of wet dust. Clara leaned against the doorframe, staring out at the desert horizon. She told herself she had only done what any decent person would do, that it was compassion, not something deeper. But in truth, she couldn't shake the image of his eyes opening, the way he had spoken her name before he ever knew her. Something about it lingered in her chest, soft and unsettling, like the echo of a song she didn't yet know the words to. Behind her, the man lay still, his breath steady now. On the table beside him, his revolver rested in the pale light, silent, cold, and waiting. And though neither of them knew it yet, that single stormy night had changed the course of both their lives forever. The morning sun rose weakly over Hollow Creek, gilding the desert dust with pale gold. The storm had gone, but the scent of rain still clung to the air. Inside the small clinic, the world was quiet again, except for the ticking of an old clock and the low breathing of the man who had nearly died beneath its roof. Clara Weston stood by the window, watching the light touch the hills beyond town. She had barely slept. Her father's words from the night before kept echoing in her mind, warnings about the dangers she had invited inside their home. She knew he was right, yet each time she thought of turning the man in, she remembered the way he'd whispered her name before dawn, as though he'd known her soul long before he ever saw her face. Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned. The stranger was sitting up, grimacing as pain lanced through his side. His hand went to the bandage, then to the revolver that was no longer there. "Looking for this?" Clara asked softly, holding the weapon by the barrel. "I kept it safe." "You won't be needing it for a while." His eyes flickered between the gun and her face. "You should have let me die out there." "Maybe," she said, setting the gun aside, "but that's not who I am." He tried to stand, swayed, and nearly collapsed again. Clara rushed forward, catching him by the arm. The heat of his skin burned against her palms. "You'll tear the stitches?" she scolded gently. "Lie back down." He exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across his face, but he obeyed. "How long have I been here?" "Since last night." "And your father?" "He knows?" "Yes." He wasn't pleased. "I don't imagine he would be." He looked toward the door, jaw tightening. "He's a doctor. He should have left me to the law." Clara met his gaze steadily. "He's also a man of mercy, though, between us, I think I gave him little choice." For a moment, something softened in his expression, just a flicker, quickly buried under the weight of exhaustion. "You shouldn't risk yourself for someone like me." "I'll decide what I risk," she said quietly. "Now rest. The fever could return." He watched her as she replaced the water basin and straightened the sheets. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it to threads of fire. She moved with a quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much suffering to fear it anymore. "What's your name?" she asked at last. He hesitated. "Elias." "Elias what?" He paused again, eyes distant. "Cain." The name carried a weight, as if it had been spoken too many times in anger. Clara's heart skipped. She had heard it before, whispered among townsfolk at the general store, printed on the yellowed posters nailed to the saloon wall. Elias Cain, wanted for armed robbery and murder. Her father's warnings returned like thunder, but she didn't show it. "Elias," she said simply, "you should eat something. There's soup on the stove." He frowned. "You're not going to turn me in?" "If I were going to, I would have done it before you woke." He stared at her for a long time, searching for the trick, the judgment, the fear, but all he saw was quiet resolve. "You don't know what I've done," he murmured. "Maybe not," she said, walking toward the door. "But I know what you are now. A man who's still breathing. That's enough for me." Days passed. The clinic returned to its usual rhythm, the sick, the weary, the endless stream of people who came seeking relief from pain that medicine couldn't always fix. Through it all, Elias remained hidden in the small back room. Clara tended to him each morning and evening, changing bandages, feeding him broth, sometimes reading aloud from her father's old books when the silence grew too heavy. He spoke little at first, but sometimes, late at night, when the lamplight burned low and the world felt softer, words came easier. "I had a brother once," he said one evening. "Younger. He followed me everywhere, even when I told him not to. We were all each other had after the war took everything else." Clara looked up from her sewing. "What happened to him?" Elias's eyes darkened. "A man named Carter happened. He ran a gang up north. Hired me for a job when I was desperate. My brother tagged along. Carter didn't like loose ends." The silence that followed was thick. Clara's chest ached for him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He gave a bitter laugh. "Don't be. I made my choices. Been running ever since." "Running doesn't mean you can't stop," she said softly. "Stopping gets you killed out here." "Maybe," she said, "but sometimes staying does the same." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. He looked away first, muttering, "You talk like you've known pain." "I've known loss," she said. "That's close enough." He didn't ask what she meant, and she didn't explain that her mother had died of fever 3 winters ago, that her father had never smiled the same since. Some things didn't need saying. As the days turned to weeks, Elias grew stronger. He began helping around the clinic, splitting wood, fixing shelves, carrying supplies when her father was away. He never spoke of leaving, and Clara didn't ask when he planned to. There was a quiet understanding between them, unspoken but constant. One afternoon, she found him outside mending the fence. His shirt clung to him in the heat. revealing the strength beneath the scars. She paused at the door, watching the way he moved. Careful, deliberate, like a man rebuilding not just wood, but something broken inside himself. "You shouldn't be working that hard yet," she called. He turned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Feels good to do something useful." "You've been useful enough. I'll finish." He smiled faintly. "You don't like being helped, do you?" "I don't like being told what to do. That much I've noticed." She laughed softly. "You're lucky my father's out on a house call. He'd have your hide for being up." Elias leaned against the post, his expression thoughtful. "He doesn't trust me." "Can you blame him?" "No," he said simply. "I wouldn't either." She crossed her arms. "Then earn it. Help him, not just me." "I'll try," and he did. That evening, when the doctor returned, Elias offered to repair the clinic's broken porch steps. The doctor regarded him warily, but said nothing. Slowly, the walls between them began to thin, though never vanish. Yet, Hollow Creek was a small town, and small towns were full of eyes. It wasn't long before whispers began. A stranger seen near the clinic. A shadow on horseback late at night. Sheriff Danner rode by one afternoon, tipping his hat with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Miss Weston," he said. "Heard there's a new hand helping your pa. Don't recall seeing him in church." Clara forced a polite smile. "He's just a patient recovering from an injury." The sheriff nodded slowly. "That's so? Well, you know how it is. Storm brought in all kinds of folk. Some good, some not." Her heart pounded, but she kept her tone even. "If you're implying something, Sheriff, say it plain." He chuckled. "Didn't mean nothing by it, just keeping the peace." When he left, Clara stood at the doorway for a long time, the unease twisting in her chest. Elias was inside, cleaning instruments. She didn't tell him about the sheriff's visit, but he must have seen the worry in her eyes. "Trouble?" he asked. "Nothing I can't handle." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If it comes, I'll handle it." That night, neither of them slept much. The moonlight spilled across the floorboards, and Clara sat by his bedside, her fingers tracing the edge of the bandage that would soon no longer be needed. "You'll have to leave soon," she said quietly. "They're asking questions." He looked at her, his face caught between gratitude and sorrow. "I know. You could head east. There's a rail line that'll take you out of this territory. And leave you to face the sheriff's questions alone. I'll tell them you were just a traveler. They'll believe it." "Will you?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers brushing hers. "Will you believe I was just a traveler passing through?" Her throat tightened. "I don't know." "Neither do I," he murmured. The space between them dissolved like mist. For a heartbeat, the world was just the sound of breathing, the ticking clock, and the whisper of wind beyond the window. His hand lingered on hers before he pulled away. "I won't bring danger to your door," he said quietly. "You already did," she whispered, "and I opened it." He laughed softly, broken, disbelieving. "You don't know what kind of man you're saving, Clara." "Then tell me," she said. He looked into her eyes, seeing the steadiness there, the refusal to fear him. "I've done things," he said at last. "Bad things. Some I regret, some I don't. But when I saw you that night, when you didn't turn away, I thought maybe I could be something else, someone else." Her eyes shimmered. "Then be that man. Start now." He reached up, touching a lock of her hair that had fallen forward. His fingers trembled slightly. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she said softly. "But you won't be doing it alone." The clock struck midnight. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and the night settled back into silence. When Elias finally lay back, his breathing slowed, but his mind refused to rest. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace, and it terrified him more than any gun ever had. Clara watched him from the doorway before turning out the lamp. As the room faded into shadow, she knew she was already too far gone to pretend indifference. The outlaw had stayed. And somewhere between fear and forgiveness, her heart had quietly decided he belonged. The days after Elias's departure moved like shadows across the walls of the Weston Clinic. The desert heat pressed down on Hollow Creek, thick and merciless, but inside the small house, everything felt colder, emptier. The chair by the window where Elias had once sat gathering strength remained untouched. Clara couldn't bring herself to move it. It had become a kind of shrine, a silent reminder of the man she had healed and the peace of her heart that had left with him. Her father noticed the change in her. He saw how she paused before dawn to watch the horizon, how her hands sometimes stilled in the middle of work, as though listening for footsteps that never came. But he said nothing. A doctor knew when wounds had to close on their own. One morning, Clara stepped outside to fetch water. The air shimmered with heat, the sand stretching far and lifeless. Yet she swore she could feel a heartbeat beneath it, the pulse of something unfinished. The sheriff's men still rode through town from time to time, searching, questioning, but Elias had vanished like smoke in the wind. She told herself that was good. He was alive. Somewhere out there, beneath the same sky, he was breathing. It should have been enough. But each night, when the lamps went dark and the only sound was the sigh of the desert, it wasn't. Weeks turned to months. The town carried on. The saloon still opened its doors, the church bell still tolled each Sunday, and the children still chased tumbleweeds down the street. But for Clara, life had folded into routine again. Patience, bandages, silence. Her father spoke little of what had passed. He worked harder than ever, as though burying his fear beneath layers of exhaustion. Then, one night, the quiet broke. The clock had just struck 11 when a knock came at the clinic door. Not hurried, not desperate like before. Steady, deliberate. Clara froze mid-step. Her father looked up from his ledger. "Who could that be at this hour?" he murmured. She moved to the door, her heart pounding. When she opened it, the world tilted. Elias stood there. He was thinner, rougher, his beard grown, his clothes dusted from the road. A scar cut across his brow that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those storm-colored eyes, were the same. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara whispered, "You came back." He managed a faint smile. "Didn't think I could stay away forever." Her father rose sharply. "Cain!" Elias turned, nodding respectfully. "Doctor, what are you doing here?" the older man demanded. "You bring the law down on us again?" "No," Elias said quietly. "I'm not running anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Clara stepped aside to let him in. "You're hurt." He glanced down. His sleeve was torn, a streak of dried blood beneath it. "Nothing serious." "Sit." When he hesitated, her tone sharpened. "Sit." He obeyed. She fetched warm water and began cleaning the wound. The smell of whiskey and dust clung to him. His hands trembled slightly, and she saw the exhaustion behind his calm. "What happened?" she asked. "Ran into Carter's men," he said. "Didn't expect them this far south. Guess some ghosts don't die easy." Her breath caught. "Carter's still alive?" He nodded once. "Thought I killed him. Turns out I was wrong." The doctor exhaled heavily. "Then you're bringing trouble straight to our door again." "I came to warn you," Elias said. "They were headed this way. They know who you are, who I stayed with." Clara's blood went cold. "You mean they know about me?" Elias's gaze dropped. "I'm sorry." Outside, the wind began to rise, whispering through the eaves. The desert always knew when blood was coming. Dr. Weston stepped toward the window, peering out into the darkness. "We can't fight a gang, Clara. We'll have to leave." Clara turned to Elias. "And you?" He looked at her, and the answer was already in his eyes. "I'll face them. They're here for me, not you." "No. Clara. No." Her voice broke through the silence like glass. "You think I saved your life just so you could throw it away? You promised me you'd stop running. You said you'd live." He stared at her, jaw tight. "Then let me protect you. That's living enough." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to look away. "You don't get to decide what I lose." The doctor stepped between them, voice low but firm. "Enough. If this gang's coming, we'll deal with it together. Elias, you'll stay out of sight until morning. I'll send for help." Elias wanted to argue, but exhaustion finally forced him to nod. "All right, just until dawn." Clara led him to the back room. He sat heavily on the edge of the cot, shoulders slumped. She knelt before him, her hands still stained with his blood. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. "I thought the same," he said. "But every road I took led me back here." She reached out, brushing the dirt from his cheek. "You shouldn't have come. I couldn't stay gone." Their eyes locked, and the storm that had been building between them for months finally broke. He caught her hand, pressing it against his heart. "Clara," he said hoarsely, "everything I am now is because of you." Before she could speak, the sound of hooves shattered the stillness outside. The floorboards trembled beneath the weight of approaching riders. Elias stood. "They're here." Clara ran to the window. Lanterns flickered in the darkness. 3, then 5, then 7. Men on horseback, their shadows long and lean against the desert sand. Dr. Weston appeared in the doorway, pale. "We can't fight them." Elias reached for his revolver, long hidden in the drawer beside the bed. "I can." Clara grabbed his arm. "Don't, please." He looked at her, his expression breaking. "If I don't, they'll burn this place to the ground. You can't fight them all. Then I'll die trying." She stepped in front of him, blocking the door. "If you go out there, I'll go too. Clara, don't try to stop me." He searched her face, torn between fury and love. "You don't understand what they'll do to you. Then you'll have to make sure they don't." Outside, the horses snorted and stopped. A voice shouted through the wind, "Cain, we know you're in there! Come out, or we light the place up." Elias drew a deep breath. "Stay behind me." Dr. Weston moved to the window. "They've got torches." Elias kicked the door open and stepped into the night. Clara followed before her father could stop her. The gang spread across the yard like wolves, torches glowing against the dark. Carter sat at the center, older now, but his cruel smile hadn't aged a day. "Well, I'll be damned," he drawled. "Didn't think you had the stones to show your face again, Cain." "Leave them out of this," Elias called. "It's me you want." Carter dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Oh, I remember her." His gaze slid toward Clara. "The good doctor's little girl. Heard you took quite a liking to my old friend." Clara's heart pounded, but she stood tall beside Elias. "You'll leave this place now." Carter laughed. "Listen to her, boys. She's got fire." Elias's voice turned cold. "You talk to her again, and I'll put you in the ground." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Still think you're faster than me?" Elias didn't answer. The torchlight glinted off his gun as he drew it, steady and sure. For a breath, the world froze. Then, the first shot rang out. Gunfire split the night. The torches scattered. Clara screamed as the air filled with smoke and dust. Elias fired again, hitting one of Carter's men. Another bullet tore through the fence post beside him. He moved like a man born for this, each shot measured, each motion sharp as lightning. But there were too many. Dr. Weston rushed out, pulling Clara behind a barrel. "Stay down." Elias ducked for cover, reloading. His shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him. Carter's laughter echoed through the chaos. "You always did like fighting lost battles, Cain." Elias looked toward the clinic, saw Clara's face pale in the flickering light, and something inside him snapped. He stepped out from behind cover, walking straight toward Carter. "Elias, no!" Clara screamed. But he didn't stop. The gunshot came fast, and the world tilted. Clara felt her body jerk, the sound swallowed by the roar of her own heartbeat. Pain bloomed through her chest. She fell, her knees hitting the dirt. Elias turned, eyes wide. "Clara!" He dropped his gun, catching her before she hit the ground. Her blood soaked through his hands, hot and slick. "No, no, stay with me," he whispered. "You hear me? Stay with me." Her lips trembled, her breath shallow. "Elias, I'm here. I'm right here." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in the corners of her eyes. "Don't run anymore." His throat closed. "I won't. I swear I won't." "Be free," she whispered. "Not from them, from yourself." Then her hand slipped from his, and the world went still. Carter's men fled into the darkness, their leader bleeding from a wound Elias hadn't even realized he'd fired. The torches sputtered out one by one, leaving only the wind and the stars. Elias held her long after her breath was gone, rocking her gently as the night grew cold. Her father knelt beside them, his face buried in his hands, but Elias didn't move. When dawn finally came, he rose with her in his arms and carried her inside. He laid her on the cot where he'd once lain dying, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and kissed her forehead. "She saved me," he said softly, "even now." Then he turned to the doctor, his voice breaking. "I'll turn myself in." The older man looked at him, tears cutting through the dust on his cheeks. "Son, she wouldn't want that." "I know," Elias whispered, "but I can't run anymore." He left the clinic as the first light touched the horizon, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet morning. Behind him, the doors swung shut, and the desert swallowed him once more. In the heart of the untamed West, where dust meets destiny and love defies every law, Clara and Elias's story reminds us that redemption is never found in running, but in the courage to love, no matter the cost. She healed his wounds, but he carried her memory to heal his soul. Some loves never fade. They simply ride beyond the sunset, where hearts remember what time cannot erase. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Chronicles, where every tale brings you back to a world of passion, sacrifice, and timeless romance beneath the golden western sky. Turn on notifications so you won't miss the next unforgettable love story from the Wild West. The nights grew warmer as summer settled over Hollow Creek, and the world beyond the clinic seemed to breathe slower beneath the wide, burning sky. The desert shimmered by day, dust rising from the ground like smoke, and the air held the faint sweetness of sage after dusk. Inside the small house that doubled as a place of healing, two hearts beat to a rhythm they tried not to name. Elias Kane no longer looked like the man who had fallen half dead at Clara Weston's feet. His color had returned, his shoulders straightened, and though the wound at his ribs still ached when he moved too fast, he was strong enough to help around the property. In the mornings, she would hear the thud of an axe splitting wood, the low rumble of his voice when he spoke to the horses behind the barn, the creak of the porch under his boots. Sometimes Clara caught herself listening for those sounds the way others listened for church bells. A quiet proof that he was still there. She told herself it was only habit, a healer's concern for her patient, but her heart knew better. Each day that passed drew her closer to the edge of something she couldn't undo. One evening, the horizon flamed red as the sun sank into the dunes. Clara was closing the shutters when Elias appeared in the doorway, a shirt clinging to him with sweat, a bucket of water in his hand. "You'll burn yourself out," she said, turning from the window. He smiled faintly. "Work keeps me steady. You could rest, you know." "I rest too much, I start remembering." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She paused, seeing the shadow in his eyes. The same darkness that sometimes crept in when he thought no one was watching. She wanted to ask what memories haunted him, but she already knew, the kind that left scars no doctor could stitch closed. "Then stay busy," she said softly. "But don't bleed yourself dry." He set the bucket down and leaned against the door frame, studying her in the dim light. The air between them thickened. "You'll always talk like you've lived 2 lifetimes," he murmured. "Maybe I have," she said. "This town ages people. You see too much, you start carrying it inside. Is that why you stay here?" Her gaze drifted toward the hills. "Someone has to. My father can't manage alone, and this is where my mother's buried." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." She turned back to him, offering a faint smile. "You can ask anything, Elias. Just be ready for honest answers." He laughed quietly, a sound that still felt new and unfamiliar in his own mouth. "Honesty's hard to come by where I come from." "Then maybe you're due for a change." When the evening settled, they sat on the porch together, the lantern flickering between them. The crickets sang, and the sky stretched endless and heavy with stars. Clara folded her hands in her lap, her white dress faintly glowing under the moonlight. "I used to think the world ended at those hills," she said. nodding toward the horizon. When I was little, I'd ask my father what lay beyond them. He'd say, "Heartache and dust, mostly," but I still wanted to see it. Elias glanced sideways at her. "You ever been beyond them?" "Once. When I was 13, my father took me as far as Willow Bend to fetch medicine. I remember the river, the way it sparkled in the sun. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." "You could go again," he said. "You've got a spirit that doesn't belong in one place." She shook her head. "The world beyond isn't kind to women traveling alone." "Then don't travel alone." She met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Fragile, dangerous, and real. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Inside the house, the clock struck 9, shattering the spell. Clara rose, smoothing her skirt. "It's late. I'll bring tea." When she returned, Elias was still staring at the desert, his thoughts far away. She poured tea into tin cups and handed one to him. Their fingers brushed, and both pretended not to notice, though the warmth lingered long after. "I used to sit like this with my brother," he said quietly. "We'd camp out near the Pecos River. He'd point at the stars and name them wrong just to make me laugh." "What was his name?" "Tommy." His voice softened. "He was 17 when he died. The bullet wasn't meant for him." Clara's throat tightened. "The man you told me about before." "Carter?" Elias nodded. "He pulled the trigger. I shot him back. Thought it would make the hurt go away. It didn't." She reached out, laying her hand gently over his. "Maybe nothing can erase that kind of pain, but you can still build something good around it." He looked at her, eyes glinting in the lamplight. "You make me believe that's possible." The night deepened. The desert wind rose, brushing through her hair, carrying the faint scent of juniper and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and lonely. Clara stood and leaned against the porch railing. "When I was a girl, I used to pray for adventure. I wanted the kind of story people would remember." Elias rose too, stepping closer. "Careful what you pray for," she smiled, not turning around. "Maybe I got it, in my own way." He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, but neither moved away. "You don't know what it means to me, to be seen like this, not as a wanted man, just as someone alive." "I see what's in front of me," she said, "not what the world calls you." His breath hitched. The words, so simple, struck deeper than any sermon. Slowly, almost without thought, he reached out and brushed his fingers against her cheek. She didn't flinch. Her eyes closed for half a heartbeat, and when she opened them, the air between them was trembling. He leaned closer, then stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Clara!" She turned toward him. "Don't," she whispered. He stepped back immediately, guilt flickering across his face. "I'm sorry." "No," she said quickly, "not that way. Don't say my name like that unless you mean it." He stared at her, the world narrowing to the sound of her breathing. "I do." She looked away, blinking back the rush of feeling. "Then don't make promises you can't keep." "I don't promise," he said, voice rough. "I just tell the truth." For a long time they stood in silence. The moon climbed higher, washing everything in silver. Later, when she went inside, her father was sitting at his desk, writing in the dim light. He looked up, studying her face. "You've been spending too much time with him. He needs care. He's an outlaw, Clara. He's a man," she said softly. "A wounded one," her father sighed. "You can't fix everything the world breaks." "Maybe not," she said, "but I can try." That night she dreamed of running water, of her hand in Elias's, of endless skies and the freedom of not looking back. When she woke before dawn, the dream still clung to her like mist. The days grew hotter. By midsummer, Hollow Creek baked under the sun. Clara and Elias began rising early to fetch water from the well before the heat set in. Each morning they walked together in silence, their footsteps in rhythm, the air between them filled with words neither dared speak. One morning, as they returned with the buckets, the sound of hooves thundered down the main road. Sheriff Danner and 2 deputies rode past, dust trailing behind them. On the saloon wall, fresh posters flapped in the wind. Wanted sheets, edges curling, the ink still wet. Clara's blood ran cold. Elias froze, staring at the print of his own face. The reward beneath his name had doubled. "They're getting closer," he said under his breath. "You'll have to stay inside," she whispered. "If they search—" "They will. They always do. Then I'll hide you." He turned to her, shaking his head. "No, you've risked enough." "I decide what's enough," she said fiercely. The fire in her voice startled him. For a moment, the world shrank to the two of them standing in the street, the townsfolk passing unaware of the war between duty and love unfolding in silence. That night, the sheriff came again. Clara saw his lantern through the window, heard the heavy knock. She opened the door with calm she didn't feel. "Evening, Miss Weston," Danner said. "Mind if I have a word?" Her father appeared behind her. "What is it, Sheriff?" "Looking for Elias Kane. Heard tell he might have been seen near this part of town." Clara's heart pounded, but her face remained still. "We've had sick folk through here, but no outlaws." Danner's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" "My daughter speaks truth," Dr. Weston said. "Now, unless you're here for medical reasons, I suggest you let us sleep." After a tense pause, the sheriff tipped his hat. "All right, then. But if you see anything at all, you send word." When the door shut, Clara exhaled shakily. Her father looked at her, eyes full of both fear and understanding. "He has to go, Clara. Tonight. I know." Elias stood in the doorway to the back room, having heard every word. His face was calm, almost peaceful. "He's right," he said quietly. "It's time." Clara shook her head. "You'll die out there. Better out there than bring ruin here." She stepped forward, tears brimming. "Don't talk like that." "I can't stay, Clara. Not when the law's at your door." She wanted to argue, to hold him there, to lock the world outside, but something in his eyes told her the decision was already made. "When will I see you again?" she whispered. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "When I'm not running." Her voice broke. "Then maybe never." He squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe someday." Before dawn, he saddled a horse from behind the barn. The desert stretched before him, endless and pale. Clara stood by the fence, her shawl whipping in the wind. He looked back once, memorizing the sight of her standing there, hair catching the first light of morning. "Go," she said softly. He nodded, his throat too tight for words. She watched him ride until the horizon swallowed him whole. Then she pressed her palm against her heart and whispered, "Come back." The sun rose, golden and merciless, burning away the last trace of the night. Inside the empty clinic, the chair where Elias used to sit remained turned toward the window, waiting for a man who might never return. And though Clara told herself to forget him, every time the wind rustled the door or the hoofbeats echoed in the distance, her heart still leapt, hoping, against reason, that the outlaw who had stayed would someday find his way back.